We are just over half-time in a lively election campaign that will see 2.46 million voters head to the polls this Friday, September 11th. There have been the expected twists and turns in the past week of intense grassroots campaigning. Walkabouts, house-to-house visits, face-to-face meet and greets, the cry of election slogans with the attendant exchange of salvos, and a record number of massive rallies, some rousing, others less so. We are also seeing a significant increase in the exhibition or attempted exhibition of multilingual and multi-dialect skills, some not very impressive. Yet, there doesn't seem to be a discernible direction that the campaign is taking, at least thus far. Strategies aren't clear, perhaps we aren't seeing them. For example, there have been calls to move away from the AHPETC saga, Aljunied, Hougang, Punggol East Town Council saga, and focus on the issues that really matter. But we seem to be going back to it in new avatars, much to the frustration of the serious-minded electorate. Yet, rally speeches are drawing record crowds, especially the opposition rallies. Landmark elections need landmark speeches. Dr. Chee Soon Juan's first speech in 15 years was, by most accounts, one of the more outstanding speeches. Then, as if to balance the tilt, DPM Tharman rose to the occasion yet again in an epic rally. We're on the final mile, 3 nights left. What's worked? What hasn't? What lies ahead? What can we expect to see in the final days and nights of campaigning? How will all this impact on how Singaporeans vote on 9/11? That's why we are here. Welcome to another GE edition of debateIQ, live from U-Town. I'm Vishwa Sadashivan. Tonight, we will attempt to review the election campaign. To help us do this, we have gathered a panel of pundits armed with crystal ball, but hopefully with some sharp insights and analysis to go with it. First up, veteran newsman, you couldn't tell from his hair, P.N. Balji, who has had more than 30 years, I gather, of news media experience. He tells me he started at the age of 12. He launched the new paper and later the Today newspaper and served as the chief editor. Today, he's a consultant and active contributor to the Edge Review and the South China Morning Post. His most important credential tonight is that he is an avid observer of this GE. Welcome again, my friend.
Thank you.
I also welcome the only thorn among us, Dr. Gillian Koh, Senior Research Fellow of the Institute of Policy Studies. Gillian heads the Politics and Governance Research Cluster, which focuses on analysis relating to party and electoral politics, the development of civil society, state-society relations, citizen engagement in Singapore. That's quite long, huh? All that is your title.
No.
Okay. Is that how your husband addresses you? No. Okay. And our final panelist is Dr. Derek Da Cunha, right? Yeah. Derek was a senior fellow at the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, where he had led the Regional Strategic and Political Studies program. A political analyst, Derek has authored 2 books on Singapore's general election. I'm delighted that he can join us again, Derek. So give us the sharpness of mind like you did the last time. In studio, in our audience, we have members of the public. I'm told they are informed, that they are intelligent, and that they are interested, and most importantly, I'm also told on paper that they are politically neutral. This discussion is being streamed live, so do call in with your questions on 65162003 or text in via poll everywhere. Right. With that, we are ready to go in for the discussion. Let me start by asking my good friend Balji the first question. Shall I ask you the first question?
Why always me?
Because you're seated next to me. So Balji, which speech do you think make the difference besides the speeches that I mentioned? Any other speech that you remember struck you?
For me, that one speech that struck a chord was given on Saturday. I was fortunate to be there at the Commonwealth.
SDP.
Yeah,
rally.
SDP rally at the Commonwealth Avenue. And the speech that really struck me was by Paul Tambaya. Why? Because he was very even-tempered. He was not a great speaker, but he had all his points, and there was hardly a pause. And he had answered some of the questions that I had in my mind. One was, why SDP? Why Dr. Chi? And why he decided that he would go into politics. And the why he decided to go into politics, the answer for that was quite good, quite earnest too. And then he said that I tried to change the policies within the system. I realized it's not possible. So I decided that I will go into politics. Then decided, so who should I pick? Then he finally looked at all the parties, their platforms, and he thought that SDP was the best because it called for equality and justice.
Something that he believes in very strongly.
Yep.
And interestingly, now that you talk about Paul Tambaya, as you may be aware, today lunchtime, there was the first lunchtime rally. Any of you attended it? Yeah. Today's lunchtime rally, SDP rally, Paul Tambaya, Professor Paul Tambaya spoke, and he made a very interesting remark, and if I may quote him, he said that DPM Tharman Shanmugaratnam was probably the most brilliant of our current ministers. He added that many in the opposition think that Mr. Shanmugaratnam would make a fine prime minister. He added, and this is the interesting part, he added, and I quote him, many of us in the alternative parties hope that one day DPM Tharman will have a falling out with the Prime Minister and will come out to lead a grand coalition of opposition parties. Pakatan Rakyat Singapura. Now, of course, here there's probably a suggestion that there is a split in the party, or the PAP is not altogether in agreement. The key people are not in agreement, right? Is that true? Is that a strategy? Is that what's coming out here? Because I don't think this is completely said in jest. I think there might be some method in madness. Derek, you're the analyst.
Actually, I don't see really a split within the PAP because it is a very disciplined organization and has been so for many, many years. What I thought was rather interesting is the fact that Raymond Lim, for example, who had been a minister, and prior to joining politics, he was in a civil society organization.
The Round Table.
The Round Table, yes. He was co-opted. And I had said to, I'll be quite candid, I had said to journalists over the last few weeks that he leaving politics really supported my view that his heart was never really in it right from the start, whether he was as a minister and then when he went to the backbenches where we now know he never made a speech over the last 4 years. So if you call that, some indication of difference within the party, I think there's a slight manifestation of it within the parliamentary party itself. But within the cadres of the PAP, it's difficult to say. There has always been the talk of possible splits within the PAP, but it is at what level? I don't see it now at the CEC level. I don't really see it at the parliamentary level, parliamentary party level. Within the cadres, no. But at the grassroots level, in terms of the members, you always get to hear that there's disagreement. For example, when we had the Punggol East by-election, there was this well-known rumor going around that a lot of the grassroots PAP activists were not very happy that Dr. Koh had been parachuted in, for example. So at the grassroots level, there may be disagreement with how the party is moving, but at the senior decision-making level, I don't really see splits.
Right. Gillian, anything to add there?
I think DPM Tharman has been on the vanguard of transforming the PAP. He didn't do that just after 2011. I think he was part of the Super 7 that was brought in 2001. And from then on, you'd seen that the party recognized the income divide in May Day speeches. He was there when Halimah Yacob started to discuss what more can be done for low-wage, low-skilled workers. You'll remember that Workfare was actually a pilot where they tried out the idea of the government supplementing incomes that did not reach a certain level. And then when he became finance minister, it was very clear that he wanted to help the government tilt the balance so that the government in its policies would serve the disadvantaged, the low-wage and low-skilled workers better. And therefore, even with the slight increase in GST, it was presented to Singaporeans as a way in which to deal with their key concerns, which is that we should maintain our egalitarian ethos. So he's front and center of that movement to really transform the PAP so that it's not just pro-business, but it's firmly pro-worker. And so I don't think that there's a split by any means. And it's very clever of politicians to try and split a camp where there is no split. I think it's quite cute that one or two blogs in presenting DPM Tharman's speech said, this is a speech that, would entice many opposition parties. This is the man that many opposition parties would like on their side and even be finance minister. Why is that? Most of our opposition parties are actually, can we say, even left of the PAP. And so they recognize him as somebody who is sort of got that egalitarian ethos down, and really the PAP has allowed him to lead all the reforms that they've made in terms of social policies. Yeah.
Well, that sounded almost like a rally speech.
You asked for it. Hi,
talk about parachuting in.
That's sorry.
We do magic. You didn't see him then, now you see him.
Sorry, yeah.
Professor Kirpal Singh, SMU. He was a bit delayed, but thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
He is charming and quite inimitable. Right? So, Kirpal, since you're here, let me sabo you by asking you this question. Do you think this campaign, the winners of this campaign, should focus on the mind or the heart? Is it going to be more a battle of the mind, intellect, hardcore figures, hardcore arguments, or are people tired of those things? And people, not that they don't want to hear about this, but what they want to hear a lot more, what is often described as the softer factors. But do the softer factors really matter in this election more than the previous elections?
Well, I think it depends on the issues. So I think there are at least 4 levels at which engagement can take place: the local, the national, the regional, and the global. I think the last 2, the regional and the global, would certainly require more of the mind than the heart. But I think the national and the local, if I'm a Sembawang resident, I'm very interested in how my constituency is developing, how I'm going to relate to my neighbor and all of that. And I think that's where the heart and the soft issues feature more prominently. I've been to a couple of rallies, and I must say that so far, I think the focus has been on the heart quite a lot. The mind, yeah.
Has it really, you think?
Yeah. I mean, I was at the PAP rally at Choa Chu Kang, and last night I was at the Workers' Party rally. And I think, I mean, of course, it's very difficult to separate the mind from the heart in total. But when you look at it in terms of where the focus is, where the emotionality, where the intensity, where the passion, where these things are actually making themselves manifest, I would say, by and large, at least at these two rallies, the speakers that I heard were focusing on heart issues rather than mind issues. Albeit that Sylvia Lim last night did say that, she's going to address three issues: the future of the Workers' Party, the future of the PAP party, and the future of Singapore. So that requires a bit of mind, and she did try to bring up some issues that obviously pertain to the mind more than the heart. But I think the winners are going to be those who know how to balance very carefully and very neatly both the mind and the heart,
Right.
because it's not an either-or thing, it's an and thing. The
Right.
conjunction should be A and D rather than or. So I think it's going to be both, yeah.
Great point.
Thanks, yeah.
Maybe this is a good time to throw the discussion open to the floor. Let me throw you a question. You talked about Sylvia. One of the points that Sylvia Lim, chairman of the Workers' Party, raised in, I think yesterday or the day before, was that she was asking the electorate to look at the Workers' Party specifically and opposition in general as an insurance, right? She said, look at us as an insurance. Because you can't necessarily, I'm paraphrasing, you can't necessarily assume that the PAP will always have clean, good leaders. What if it turns bad? And if you don't have an alternative, then people don't have a choice. That's an argument that she's putting forth, right? Is that a compelling argument for the opposition? That look at the opposition as an insurance policy that you start building up, so that should there be a problem with the main ruling party, at least you have a fallback. Because today we don't, right? If something was to go wrong with the ruling party, right? And if people are not happy, let's say there's something completely unforeseen, right? We don't have an option, because none of the opposition parties are ready to move up and be the government. We probably have to resort to some form of coalition, which is not good news. So what's your take on this line, this particular line of argument? Anyone? Can you all not look so stunned, serious? Yes, I'll ask the neurologist,
No, I think
because you know about the existence of the brain.
well, I'm not sure whether I'm the best proponent of that. I think there are two sides to it. One of it is, I think, based on the premise that if there is a problem in the future, you need somebody to step up. But I think more presently, if you're talking about what we need now itself, I think she was also alluding to the fact that there's something about the adversarial system that tends to bring out the truth. I mean, that's exactly what happens in a court of law, I guess. So even if somebody is caught red-handed in a crime, you still need to go through the process of an adversarial system. And that's been kind of taken for granted all over the world as the gold standard of law. So I think it's in the same vein, if you have a system which is based on consensus all the time, especially if the consensus comes from a very disciplined, if you use the positive words discipline, but if you want to look at it negatively, it's a cohesive, coerced unit, then I suspect that somewhere along the line, the best solutions may not come out. So I think when I was listening to her, I thought that there was the other tangential point that she was trying to make, that there is something sacred, perhaps, maybe sacred is a bigger word than I meant, but something important about the adversarial system that ensures that the best policies come out.
Right. Wilson, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think she made an interesting argument in terms of comparing the opposition to an insurance policy. And I think most of us can identify with that. But yet, there was a time when we all felt that, even from an insurance perspective, that as one gets older, what is truly your insurance? I mean, at one time, people would feel that the children would be the insurance. The children would be the ones who will look after them. That the family would be the insurance. And that viewed that way, the insurance policy concept is an external sort of construct. And if internally an organization, even a party as we were to look at it, or the government, is able to maintain high standards, is able to address issues when they arise, and is able to try to deal with them and cope with them, the lack of an insurance policy or the presence of an insurance policy is actually quite irrelevant. The point is really, how do you deal with a crisis or deal with some kind of lapse, if there were to be one. But putting that aside, even if you were to actually still look at the insurance concept as an argument, then my question then is, who are you buying the insurance policy from? If you were to look at the opposition, obviously she's speaking from the Workers' Party. If you look at the opposition as a whole, I think there is still a way to go, both in terms of unity, the number of three-corner fights that arises, the number of almost comical situations of candidates chanting for the wrong party. I think partly because they switch parties so often that they might have forgotten where they're from. And I think that's also another factor to look at when comparing what kind of insurance policy that you're actually getting.
Okay, now I guess the follow-up question to that is, do we see a discernible strategy behind all this? I mean, or is it, I mean, frankly, this is the first election that I'm observing where I'm not able to see some kind of a strategy. I'm seeing a lot of firing. You know, you have APHETC, and then you have now a new development coming up, you know, about the Punggol East, right? Whether there was a surplus or whether deficit, and then you've got insurance policy. You've got all these different things, but they don't seem to be pulling together into a strategy. I'm not seeing it in the PAP, honestly, and I'm not seeing it in any of the opposition parties, unless I'm missing something. Is there a discernible strategy that any of us is seeing so far in this election? And it would be wonderful if you can share. Anyone? Gillian? Or anyone? You want, you? Of course, yes.
But I thought that I was quite impressed with some of the lines that the opposition seems to have taken across the parties. Like, for example, I noticed, I don't know whether you observed also that they have not used the word opposition parties anymore, but alternative parties. So I think it's deliberately put out as alternative parties rather than opposition. And I think if you listen to some of the speeches, you can see a lot of them actually wax lyrical about the PAP leaders and how they are very good and everything and how they're going to work with them. So that seems to be a strategy in my mind, and it seems to be universally adapted across. You don't get this vitriolic attacks of the
to make it less adversarial.
Yeah, so I think it's a strategy that seems to work, and something that Workers' Party has shown works, and Mr. Chiam used to show that in Parliament also. So I think that's a strategy that I can discern.
Yes, Ethan.
I think the PAP has kind of learned from the past few elections not to get distracted. Previously, one issue or another will cloud their message. This time around, they have been very, very consistent in pushing out a certain position, or may not just be a strategy, but how they've positioned themselves as being people of a neutral ground. They've been open-minded. Let's listen to the arguments. Let's not be dispassionate. Let's not go overboard and look into these things. So I think both sides have got started out, and there's a game of chess going on right at this moment. Move and counter move. I think the opposition expected the PAP to get hung up on Hougang, Aljunied. Then when they left that after one day, the opposition for a while had to readjust. And they readjusted that platform very well. And the PAP now is readjusting accordingly. And I think this one so far has been both sides being very cautious about how they approach this election.
Okay. Panel, any response to that?
Actually, I take a different point of view from what you've just articulated. I see the PAP campaign strategy as being twofold. One is to focus on the AHPTC on the one hand, and on the other hand is nostalgia, invoking nostalgia among Singaporeans in terms of the last 50 years being a great period of stability and relative prosperity. Okay, now if you ask me, I'm not entirely clear whether this dual strategy, which effectively, on the one hand, is negative campaigning, and on the other hand, nostalgia is a very good idea for the PAP. I do not think it's going to get them that much traction, frankly speaking. But on the other hand, I see consistency from some of the opposition parties in plugging away the really central issue that seems to be resonating with many voters. And let's face it, it is the immigration issue. When I went to the SDP rally at Commonwealth Avenue on Saturday, that was the one point that seemed to resonate with a lot of people whenever it was raised by speakers. Okay, so, and I must say that my initial thoughts of this election was that there would be some degree of apathy because we are in SG 50 years of independence, plus the recent passing of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. So I thought there would be a degree of apathy, but I did not see any apathy at the SDP rally on Saturday. I went to that rally, same rally for SDP, for the same division, electoral division, and the same venue in 2006, and it was chronicled in the book that I wrote on the 2011 general election. So it was very good for me to go back this time round because they're fighting the same electoral division, same party, and at the same venue. So you can compare crowd size, and I would say it was double that of 2011.
So what's the implication of that?
The implication is that SDP has been able to energize the ground and appeal to quite a number of people. And I put it largely to the
What
fact...
do you think, sorry, Derek, what do you think is, I mean, for example, I would imagine that the SDP rally, Commonwealth, the open area, the one on Saturday would have had about 10,000?
That's right.
Right? Is 10,000 enough of a critical mass?
10,000 is not enough of a critical mass to take down a GRC.
Yeah.
But they only had 5,000 back in 2011. Let's get one point straight on this matter. SDP has never been able to surmount the 40 percentile level in any electoral division since 1991, since Chee Soon Juan has become Secretary General. In the Holland Bukit Timah GRC in 2011, SDP secured 39.9% of the vote.
Right.
So if it's double the number of crowd size, as Viswa, I think I told you, mine is evidence-based research.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't take figures from thin air. If it's double the number of crowd size, I can cautiously say that SDP will likely surmount the 40 percentile level, at least for Holland Bukit Timah,
right,
the way they're going. I'm not suggesting that they will take down the GRC,
sure,
no.
Sure. So you're saying that commensurate with that doubling of the size, you would see some, not exactly...
It's moving in that direction
moving in
upwards,
that direction.
yeah.
Okay. Yes, Shanta.
I think another observation of PAP strategy has been that there is a clear reliance on senior ministers and the Prime Minister to carry this campaign, right? So, for example, you see in Aljunied, you have the Prime Minister pitching for Aljunied, you have Tharman who is sitting with the new candidates. But I'm not sure about the strategy because we're seeing less of what the individual MP stands for, and at the same time we're talking a lot about, or the PM has been talking a lot about leadership renewal and how we are looking at this election to bring in the future leaders, but yet we know very little about the incoming candidates. And when you listen to some of their speeches, they don't seem to be able to articulate their stance on national issues or even what they're able to do on the ground for the citizens. And there seems to be a reliance on the machinery and what the PAP has built so far, rather than being able to stand their ground.
Why do you think that is so? Why do you think the senior leaders of the PAP, in particular the Prime Minister, I mean, I don't remember seeing the Prime Minister having such a strong presence in the rallies and making substantive, and hosting press conferences during the hustings. I don't remember seeing that in the previous years in this way.
In fact,
what do you think is accounting for that?
I think you mentioned strategy.
Yeah.
If there's one strategy that I can see, and that is putting the Prime Minister front and center of the PAP campaign.
Yeah.
Right? Honestly, I've not seen this.
I don't remember seeing
I
it
remember Mr. Goh Chok Tong, when he became Prime Minister, he decided
Yeah.
that he would contest and create a by-election, and he contested, and his votes went down.
Yeah.
Or the votes for that area went down.
Yeah.
So I think this is a clear sign that the PM feels that he has to
You got a
not just
clear
win this
mandate.
election.
Got a clear
But I
mandate.
think if you look back at 2011, he has to increase PAP's popular vote
Yeah.
from 60.1, which was post-independent low. And second one, he has to stop the GRC type.
Yes.
So for these two reasons, I think he has put himself up there. And you will have seen, right, in all our constituencies, the PM's poster.
Yes.
The face, right?
Yes.
In fact, my neighbor asked me, is the Prime Minister contesting in our constituency? I said, no, he's in Amokyo. So I think it has, now whether, and that is somewhat a high-stake game
Yes.
for the PM.
Yeah, it is. Can anyone comment from the audience?
May I come in here?
Yes,
Rizwan?
yes, please,
I
Kapil.
just want to say that, like you, I find it difficult to track any cogent strategy. And I would stretch that beyond the PAP as well. I think the opposition or the alternative parties, actually, personally, I think in political, the parry and thrust of political debate, you do need the word opposition. So I think by saying they're only an alternative, I see that as a bit of a weakening on the side of the parties that think they're only providing alternative voices. I think we do need opposing voices too. I mean, after all, a battle is fought not when an alternative is offered, but when opposing
view.
point of view is offered. So I would like to say, I mean, the PAP much of the time uses rhetoric and repetition and reinforcement quite a bit. And the opposition tries to go a little bit beyond that and come up with some new ideas, but I think they are also either one, not clearly thought out, meaning the ideas. Therefore, there's an idea, but there's no practicality to the idea or no logical working out of the details. And so they leave themselves vulnerable and open. But one overall comment, and I don't know whether our wonderful people here would join me in agreeing, I find that somehow this year's campaigning lacks the kind of real communication power. I mean, apart from our DPM and PM and a couple of people from various parties, the overall tenor of debate and discussion seems to be like heading south rather than going forward. I don't know. I mean, do you all agree? I mean, first, they're not good communicators. That's what I'm trying to say. And I was speaking with people who understand Malay well and understand Mandarin, and they were telling me that they were also a little bit disheartened at the lack of real, power and intensity and passion in a lot of the speeches. So when the passion comes in, it's always to either ridicule or to restate or something, rather than chart a new territory. I'm just putting this forward as a kind of discussion
Response?
point.
Yes, please.
Hello?
Yep.
Basically, what I agree with you that there really isn't an overall macro view of anything, and it's quite disheartening to see that. I mean, you had 4 years to prepare for this, and I think you could have come into these elections preparing for, say, an issue like foreign manpower coming in.
Correct.
You could have done a census of Singapore and saying that, hey, which portion of foreign workers you don't want? Do you not want the bankers, or you don't want the construction workers or service sector workers? But nothing's been done. I mean, you get one brush and you paint the whole lot as foreign workers. I think maybe they're facing a problem because if they come up with a census like that and it comes out that we don't want all these middle class people, then you're going to lose your bankers, your bank's going to relocate, your multinationals relocate. So maybe that's the issue that they face. But I think they really needed to come out and explain that, because we spent 20 years trying to build up the mice industry, the whole buzz that Lee Kuan Yew said in 1994 we lack. I mean, he said that Hong Kong was so much better than we are. But right now, we've done all that work, and you look at the entire landscape, this manpower issue is affecting us as a nation that attracts people here for work, for fun as well. I give you statistics from 2000. I think our average tourist stay was 1.9 days.
Yes.
So it's gone up to like 4 days because we put in all that work behind it. There's a lot of work there for Singaporeans to have. So what do we need to do? If you segmentize all these different parts of HR that's needed, then you can just go in there and say that, hey, maybe the bankers need an alternative set of schools for their children, something like that. So if you don't segmentize it and take one brush for everything, I mean, it's not going to solve our problems, because I think you need to compartmentalize this problem and solve it piecemeal.
So how do you think that issue is being translated in this campaign?
It's not.
It's not, right?
It's not. They're just talking, it's xenophobia, talking from every party. Oh, we will stop the foreigners coming. I think that is silly, because they're in a position, the incumbents are in a position to actually do something about it and talk about it and have a plan, rather than go back to the same things that the opposition say. Oh, we won't bring in so many foreigners. We'll look at Singaporeans first. Yes, we look at Singaporeans first, but you can also bring in foreigners and say that, how do we look at Singaporeans first? Colburn 1 has built 100,000 HDB flats, right? Do we need another 100,000? Do we need to nationalize the public transport system? I think that's very important to ask that question, right? I mean, it's for the national good and not for the good of a few board of directors or whatever.
So from what you're saying, what I'm gathering is that there's no real conversation or debate taking place. I mean, the opposition parties or the alternative parties are going on talking about picking up their pet topics and talking. It's not really engaging, or the PAP side is not really engaging on that. They're going on their own agenda and talking about the things that... So is it that there's no engagement across?
I think the incumbents should pick the fight that they want to fight, and they are in possession of the information that they can actually garner. So they could have come prepared for these elections, and I don't think they have in that. I'm giving one example in terms of foreigners coming.
I think they did AHPETC. I think they came in, no, honestly, I think they came in with AHPETC, and then at some point they realized that no, shift gears, and they dropped it, and now they're moving on to something else. Now what that something else, I mean, let's try and establish. Gillian, do you know what they've moved on to?
He's dying to say
something.
Oh, you want?
There. Okay, one.
Actually, I have to agree with Adrian somewhat, and yourself, Vishwa. Yeah. I think they made a mistake talking about AHPETC so early in the game, because they're opening up a whole can of worms, right? The audit on People's Association, the AIM saga, and to me, I think that was a bad playbook to start with. I think a smart play was how Tharman actually articulated in his rally speech. He took their points and broke it down and explained to people the complications of dealing with tax policies. And that's exactly where I completely agree with what Adrian said. And to a certain degree, I think PAP is playing defense. Right now, they should take the game to the opposition and play an offensive game. Really go down to the issues. Let's talk about how will the currency, movements, the stock movement, the economy impact every Singaporean. Let's not forget about that. Eventually, right, the economy is going to hurt. And, are some of these debates that we're having about foreign workers and foreign talent going to solve those? I don't know. And of course, I'm really keen to know whether, how are we going to solve the transportation issue? It's been going on for years.
But this is what I'm saying. I mean, this is my view. I'm not seeing enough of an engagement. It's like you're going on parallel tracks, having separate conversations, but the one time I saw the engagement is exactly that speech, where there was a deliberate effort to identify points that were raised by opposition parties and then systematically responding to them without resorting to vitriol, or being patronizing, but systematically addressing them. Then throwing the ball back at the opposition, say, now you respond. Then you're having a debate. If you have that kind of a debate, I feel we are all better off for it, because we are listening to a debate and arriving at some conclusion. But when the conversation is going on two parallel tracks, no one is the better for it. That's my concern.
And Vishwa, I agree with you.
And we have only 3 more days.
And in fact, I think the voters are confused. I go around talking to my colleagues, and many of them have no idea what the issue of AHPETC is about.
Maybe that's the strategy. I don't know.
Actually, following up from that, I think one of the great attractions of the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew was the fact that he was decisive, he was gutsy, and in his own words, he had gumption. And so when he came on strong, you either retreated like in shock and horror and, oh my God, how do I handle this? Or you said, I'm going to hit back. And there, the debate became a real debate. Now we have minor engagements, and sometimes, I think Vishwa is right, the parallel tracks are actually, not only confusing people, actually bewildering many of us and wondering what is happening. But the one about the texting was, interesting because Paul Tambaya, responded and said, at least DPN Tharman is getting something right. He's not beginning to take us, more seriously, and he's also aware of how debilitating some of the taxes can be to the ordinary person in Singapore. So I think that elevated the level of discussion a little bit more, but it's still at the level of discussion. It's not a full-blown debate. And I think, the ruling party should come out strong because people are waiting. You want to provide leadership, right? The so-called opposition parties are still in a very novel kind of state. It's still new game, new fun. I mean, last night, Workers' Party was fun. I mean, the rally was fun. It's like a high school party. It was very, very good. But if you want to engage at the level of leadership, all right, then what you say has to be clearly heard. And so in a party atmosphere, you cannot hear what people are trying to say. Because everybody is sort of like talking and chatting and having fun. But elections are not just fun issues. And I think it was good for the PAP to realize that you can't win an entire, general election on one council issue. Dealing with, it is significant. As somebody pointed out, that if there is something really wrong, let's understand what really went wrong. Because, on the one hand, you say we have to take certain risks. Well, they took some risks. Maybe things went wrong. And they've been chided for it and all of that. So let's forget that. Go forward. But my worry also is that nobody so far seems to have talked about the regional and global issues. And I think it's the region and global issues that are going to impact Singapore going forward as a city that's trying to, earn its place at the center. Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I just jump in because there are various themes of exchanges which maybe we can remind ourselves about.
No.
There have been many exchanges, actually.
Yeah. I'm just saying.
There have been many.
Yeah. May I, as a moderator, say something? Thank you.
You've been asking me to say something.
No, I'm coming to you. I just want to say, I see hands, I see people being engaged. Usually for a discussion like this, it'll be a lot more effective if we keep statements shorter so that it moves faster, right? So it's a request. Let's try and keep the statements shorter and then move on. Yes?
Okay, WP has been in Parliament. It's had that many duly elected MPs, so it's sort of tried to do a few things. Strategy is tried to say that we've been there and we've forced the government to sit up and make the U-turns. The response of the PAP is that this is the fable of the rooster, that is taking credit where it actually is not due. So you remember that exchange?
Yep.
Okay. Also, that WP is there as a check and balance on the PAP, so it's sort of trying to say that we've been holding them accountable. The PAP is saying, actually, who is there to check on the checkers? They can't themselves say they will hold everybody accountable when they themselves are not accountable. That is what the AHPTC issue is about. Remember that? So that is very key. Now, when the SDP actually started its campaign, you will also recall the candidate in Holland Bukit-Timah at his party conference saying that this is really the road to Greece. So you remember that? That's also another key narrative, and it wasn't just brought up over the weekend by the Minister of Finance, the candidate in Jurong GRC, Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam. This is something that has been brought up quite a few times already. The PAP has also, as Professor Kapal talked about it, has also gone local, so it's really keen to remind voters who actually, if you meet, are really concerned about what's happening on the ground, has been out there to say these are the things that we promised that we will do, remember, and we have delivered. And here are the local manifestos. So this is something where, of course, obviously, the opposition is not able to answer to. So there are actually many themes, just to keep short. I think that's sort of a reminder of the key narratives. The rooster, the road to Greece, who's checking the checkers, who's forcing the U-turns.
The tiger and the mouse.
And there you go.
Few more, yeah.
There's been many exchanges actually.
Yes.
Okay, I take a different point of view from what has been said. This two-track policy actually is a very deliberate one. The PAP has intentionally attempted to set the narrative for this entire election by focusing on AHPTC, all right? I don't see why the opposition, the WP, has to play that particular game. So it can speak whatever it wants to speak on in terms of minimum wage, in terms of the immigration issue, and so on and so forth. So I think it's perfectly legitimate. The other point that has been raised, and I think is a concern of many voters, is why is this general election being held at least 1 year ahead of schedule? It has not, escaped people's mind why this is the case. The PAP can simply, palm it off and say, oh, the ground is sweet, that's why we're having it now. But other people will say, what is going to happen after this general election? And why is the government not engaging on this issue of the possible huge influx of immigrants into Singapore? The fact of the matter is that Singapore has signed up to quite a number of free trade agreements which will start to kick in at the end of this year. And this is a real concern by very many people. There are the voters out there are not ignorant. These are issues which they are aware of. And I'll tell you something. Okay, in the 2011 general election, did anyone get wind of the population white paper then?
No, it was
exactly not. Wait. Let me finish this point.
It was asked for.
Wait. Let me finish this point.
But you got to wrap very quickly, and then she's dying to say something.
The point I want to make is that, you see, this population white paper with the parameters of 6.9 million planning target was only introduced on 28 January 2013, and guess what? That was just 2 days after the Punggol East by-election. Even before.
Thank you.
Even during the Punggol East by-election campaign, it was not. So this is the thing. People don't forget these issues, and people are wondering what on earth is going to happen after this election is over. Is it going to be the case that a lot of unpopular policies, announcements are going to be introduced immediately after this election because of the precedent that I just mentioned?
Okay, stop. Go.
Thank you. No, I think, of course, in the run-up to the 2011 GE, the population issue was already hot. And due credit to WP, they said, what are the numbers? But due credit to the government, wind it back a few years back, you will know that, of course, URA had already established its planning parameter for growth. If we were keeping track, we will know that this has been an ongoing discussion. And even before the white paper was issued, there was a year-long consultation process, which started in March 2012. The public consultation process closed in October that year. And then the white paper was supposed to be issued in November. It wasn't, and it was pulled right out to the end of January. So that's just being historical about it and saying that, the issues have been there. And in fact, it was a hot topic in 2011. Why have an election in SG50? I think the PAP itself has also explained quite explicitly. You will recall, it is about leadership transition. They've said it time and time again. Why do we have to do it now? It's the year where we can take stock and then look at the next 50 years, right? Next 50 years. So they have said it, and if you haven't heard it, it's fine.
I hear you.
So the key thing is the transition, or actually the bringing in of new faces, potential ministers, from which, right? This is what everybody wants to know. From which the next prime minister will emerge.
Is it what everybody wants to know?
and it requires that run-in time.
No, but
So,
why do we assume that that's what everybody wants to know?
No. The people.
That's what everybody.
Friends
That's what.
all want to know who the next prime minister
Maybe
is.
your
Come
friends,
on.
lah. But I don't know. But no, but
let's watch.
No. But herein.
Email in.
No, but herein lies the issue. This is probably the ruling party's agenda. I mean, this is what you want to say, and they've
You asked, right?
No.
Why this year?
No. What I'm saying is that's what they want to communicate. But what Derek is saying is, just because a party wants to communicate something doesn't mean that everybody needs to want to be engaged.
Right.
So that's where the problem is. You see, we assume, or the party assume, or you assume that this is
asked
what.
the question, right?
No.
Why this year?
No.
Ahead of time.
I didn't say why this year. I have
1
been
year
on.
ahead of time.
I
Which
have
was
been.
also something
I have
that
been
opposition parties
I have
were-
been on record, and I put it out in the open domain that I have always said, in fact, in this book that I wrote on 2011 election, that we would expect a general election in 2015, and I have been on record over the last few months that I told journalists that to the benefit of the PAP, they should hold the general election at the end of the year. It becomes neatly at the end of the calendar year, and no one can say that you have a particular agenda because it falls neatly at the end of the calendar year.
Let's not second guess the
Okay.
PAP.
Don't have to, you just read their statements.
Well,
You
that's
don't have
second
to
guessing as
second
well.
guess.
Anyway, yes. I think otherwise our audience will chabot. Okay, so let's.
Hi, I'm a first-time voter, sir. Yeah, I'm a first-time voter and a student myself. So I've just been observant for a while, and going back to Prof. Karpal's statement about regional and global issues. For one, I think that rising costs is a big issue that is yet to be addressed. Pardon me if I'm wrong. That is yet to be addressed by both the opposition as well as the ruling party. And why I'm saying so is because recently RBS has exited out of Singapore, not just Singapore, out of several other Asian locations. And there are other investment banks and financial institutions that are moving out of Singapore into other corporate hubs such as Mumbai, Bangalore, Shanghai, which leaves the crisis as posed by my friend here, who said that bankers, and this joins back to the migrant issue, which is a local issue. So it's not just a local infrastructure-based issue that we're all looking forward. A strategy has to be designed such that the local, national, regional, and global strategies have to tie up together in order to play a bigger part for the future of Singapore. So do you guys really think there is a strategy in play right now?
So let's look at the manifestos of all the parties, right? Read Workers' Party. It is a line that is similar to their blue paper, which is that there should be no increase in foreigners here, that the pool of foreign workers should remain at 1.5 to 1.6 million, which is where it is at, and only change it if resident workforce doesn't go up by 1%. Read SDP. They would not like any increase in foreigners. Sing first. It's quite obvious. So each and every one of the alternative parties is actually dealing with the issue you are raising, and it is to actually have tighter control. Yeah. So I think that's being addressed. I think how the PAP has been trying to address it is to say that we are trying to institute, which they have, and is not acknowledged in the other manifestos, a fair consideration framework where WP says market testing. The PAP government has the fair consideration framework, which is market testing for 14 days, which they have said that they will improve on, in order to make sure that that one additional worker in that salary range up to 12,000 per month is market tested for whether he is needed.
Let's not go into the policy details.
Yeah. So is it being responded to? It is, in different ways from different parties, and I think you need to pay attention to those details as to which party is saying let's tighten the noose for you, or
okay.
Let's
All right. I've got to stop it here.
Yeah.
Let's get some ground rules. We are not here to represent any party.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think we need to be very careful about that.
Of course.
No, we are not here to represent. We are here to establish whether or not there appears to be a strategy, whether anything is discernible. But I would urge that we do not go into into extrapolation or explanation of policies. I mean, this is not the platform for that, right?
But if the question is, what is the strategy, then the answer has to be, these were the strategies or are the strategies.
Okay, all right. As long as we understand the point. Now, what I suggest we do now is ask, if I could move on, before I come to you, if I could just move on and ask this question. There appears to be a strategy adopted by the Workers' Party, SDP, in claiming that their manifesto in 2011 and the subsequent pressure that they mounted in Parliament through their presence has resulted in significant policy changes, right? That's also a strategy, because you're hearing the two significant parties in this election staking their claim as the stimulus or the catalyst for significant change. Any comments on that from the audience?
I can make a quick point
Yes.
about
I'm going to come back to you, Balji, because you've been very quiet. You cannot just come and sit here and not say anything.
I'm very bored.
So
that's why I'm going to come back to you. Oh yeah.
Not so much influenced directly by their policies per se, but the very fact that there's a credible opposition that can take the votes away, gets them on their feet a little bit more. So I could be wrong about this, but I think at no point in the history of Singapore was there a time when the minister resigned before the election. In the past, if you remember, there were resignations after the elections, but there was no admissions before the elections about the deficiencies that were going on in the ministries. But here you had, for the first time, a minister resigning before the elections, and that itself, I think, is vindication of the point that they are on their toes now.
Okay, all right. Let's hold it there. We have a live call, our first live caller. We'll take the call. Yes, can we take the call now, please?
Yep.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. Good evening. Thanks for taking my call. I'm Charlotte.
Hi, Charlotte.
Lim.
Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can all hear you, but we can't see you.
Okay. Okay. I'm opening this question to the panelists. Do you think the electorate is beginning to more closely analyze the manifestos of parties, or is the election still really about big personalities? Thank you.
Okay, stay online in case we want to talk to you. Right. Anyone wants to? Balji, why don't you take this? Since it's such a simple question, come on. We'll give you all the simple questions.
I'll give you the simple answer.
Yeah.
The simple answer is no. That they are not examining the manifestos, as I think they should.
Right.
I'm talking in very general terms. I think it is still very personality based. And just to take this one step further, I think we are talking about elections. And we are trying to intellectualize elections. Can you name me one country where it is done in a very coherent way, with the head, not the heart? I don't think you can find any. So let's not try to be, as the economist said, exceptional country. We are not. So in elections, it is always like that. It is for the audience, the people, to examine their own contenders in their own constituencies and decide, right?
But there's a simple correlation, Banji. If on the one hand we say that the more educated our citizens become, the more mature they will be when it comes to election time. That means that there is a higher level of consciousness, awareness, and therefore analysis. So you can't have it both ways. So as Singapore becomes more educated, the voters are going to be more discriminating, more discerning, and more analytical.
Okay.
In fact, Balji, you yourself in our earlier discussion had said that there are clear signs that the electorate is a lot more discerning and a lot more mature this time round. In fact, Derek, you suggested that as well. So
no, I did say that. I'm not denying that. But just to take Kirpal's point, educated. What do you mean by educated? So I think that's an important point, right? My own discussion with a lot of educated people, their understanding of first the politics, but I think more significantly, background knowledge. Many of them don't have it.
I think
and I'm surprised, that educated people ask some very basic questions And when you throw questions at them, they can't answer.
True, but
because they don't have the background knowledge.
But Charlotte is probably still listening to us to answer a question directly. I think it is also necessary to say that in a lot of our schools, in a lot of our universities, colleges, there are a lot of avenues for actual discussion of very major, significant political issues.
Agree.
And I think the signs going forward are that our young, I mean, there will always be a section of society that is indifferent in some ways, right? To them, they are like, couldn't care less. But there's also a rising community of young people. And I think the next general election will be having these young people who are now like 18 and 19, when they become 21 and eligible to vote, I think they're going to be looking out for the kind of things that Charlotte is asking us to, sort of make a decision upon. I mean, I think they're going to be people who are actually going to think before they cast the vote.
My take on this is, I don't think manifestos matter very much anymore. Honestly, going forward. We are talking about a generation where economy of language is very important. Yes. Truncation of words, different spelling, So, I mean, a 100-page manifesto, who on earth reads a 100-page manifesto? So really, I think at the end of the day, manifestos, should be a thing of the past. Succinctly put across what you stand for. And people then need to know, this is what you stand for, this is your policy position, not necessarily a policy position. Let me now try and understand and engage. Now, so my own sense is, let's move away from manifestos and understand where people are coming from, And on that note, maybe we can even talk about the influence of social media, digital media, in this election. I go back to what you said, Kripal. There's a lot more engagement taking place as a result of digital media. Okay, let me give you an example. I chaired the NUSS forum. Right. NUSS has always had a pre-election forum. It's a tradition. Right. National University Society, right? But this is the first time they agreed to have it open to the media. Right? First time.
Yep.
And it has had a huge impact on the ground. A lot of people watched it. Non-university people watched it as well. So you see, social media has been involved in propagating some of these ideas, allowing for engagements such as this. What's the impact of that? Do you think that will translate to the outcome in the actual election, polling day? Derek, I know that you've said before that it's not. So you want to share very quickly. Let's keep it moving.
I just want to answer the caller's point. Yes. I think the basic...
Is the caller still here?
Sharon is her name. Charlotte. Okay. She said whether personalities count. I think personalities do count in this election to some extent, but it's really party branding. Why is it that WP can get 30, 40, 50,000 at its rallies, whereas SDP at most of the Commonwealth Avenue rally is 10,000? It's the branding of the party that's far more important. And if you remember, Viswa, when I did the last IQ debate here, I said that it is really people who can relate and associate with a particular party that is very, very important. Yep. And I noticed that at yesterday's election rally in East Coast, for East Coast GRC at Simei Road, that the WP made it a point to have ample number of Chinese language speakers, speeches, okay, because they have a very clear sense of their audience and whom you should appeal to, and that is lower middle class Singaporeans, working class Singaporeans, and the sandwich class, which they want to draw considerable support from. So it's really party branding over personalities, I would suggest.
I'm not sure if Lau Chia Kiang was not leading the Workers' Party, the kind of support that they get at rallies will be there. It's to be proven, but I have my doubts.
Okay, let me throw it open. Any views on the points raised about social media, the impact of social media? First you, Wilson, and Rajan after that. Can somebody pass the mic to Rajan behind? Go ahead, Wilson.
Yeah, I think back on a point on party versus personality. I think personality definitely is taking on a significance. I think the people want to know who the candidates are. The Prime Minister putting his photograph all over Singapore, not just in the constituency that he's in, is another sign of personality and his popularity being put at stake. And I think even the videos of certain opposition members coming up showing their home and their families and all that is a way to show who they are behind the sort of the public face that they have. So I think social media, I think Chee Soon Juan's point was that in the interview that Vishwa you did with him, was that it was a way for him to communicate who he actually is, away from what mainstream media had previously painted him out to be. So after the 15 years that he's been away from the limelight or the spotlight, he's now able to come out and really communicate who he is. I don't know if he has had sufficient time to get that message through, if it had been effective, but I certainly enjoyed the video that you put together.
Thank you. Rajan.
Yeah, my point is that actually social media did have a big impact in these elections because actually when you hosted the NUSS the event, actually I did not know anything about IQ for a fact. It's only through.
How dare you?
So it's through Facebook that I got to know. Then I started following up on IQ, and then that whereby okay. Then the second point actually I'm saying is that on SDP's rallies, right? The initial, I think the first rally, if I not was mistaken, was at Choa Chu Kang. They had a sizable kind of crowd there. The second was at Bukit Panjang, and all this, and day by day the rallies grew in large amounts because of social media. It's
and the streaming.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think Jurong East and also so forth. So I think this is something which is, I think social media does play a great impact on this year's election especially.
Okay. Any other comments on this, John?
I think to add on to that and to go back to a few points earlier that Derek has mentioned, and of course Dr. Koh, about engagement from the PAP, and we go back to the most controversial 6.9 million, parameters and all that. I'm sorry, Dr. Koh, but they say they consulted the public. Maybe they did, but why do we have such an adverse reaction from, again, the public? Is the public, Kelong, they chose a certain type of people that they choose to interview or to get feedback from, or is it really truly, a straw poll throughout the population? That's one. In terms of engagement and on social media, of course, personally, I would like to see a more and a deeper understanding, not just your house, not just your, you're sleeping in the car when it's, you're tired after a whole day of running around, but truly about, and maybe back to the point on we being educated. We really truly like to see a breakdown of how you feel personally about policies. I think Tharman has been doing this very well on the international stage. And that's engagement, where he spoke at the St. Gallen Symposium. Tharman has been very clear about how Singapore is going to be managed, is going to be run. And it doesn't speak to me at this point what the PAP is trying to put forth throughout this whole election. But whereas for the opposition, and of course, it's always easy to oppose or to hate, But when I see Dr. Chee, standing on the stage, sure, he has 15 years of bad press, he was put down through and through. But when he smiled and when he told people that it's great to be back here after 15 years, you really do feel that, even though I'm watching it live from overseas.
Okay.
And that's engagement to me on social media.
Two more quick points and then we come back to the panel. Yes.
Okay. Actually, it's a question for the panel on social media. What do you think the parties could have done better in the use of social media to get their message out? For example, do you think there is a missed opportunity to educate the voters about the policy issues and the policy direction?
So first of all, I don't like the word educate. It puts someone on a pedestal and the rest of us. Educate means you are in a position to teach. Communicate, socialize, but don't say educate.
To communicate, persuade.
Yeah, okay. But you meant socialize, huh?
I meant it.
Yes, okay. Right.
Just want to point a finger for a moment in terms of strategy at the opposition.
Which finger?
I want to draw on something that Professor Karpal had hinted at a lot earlier in this conversation about the opposition renaming themselves not quite as opposition, but more as an alternative party. We talked about insurance policies. Now, that is just not ballsy enough. That's just not what the electorate are looking for. The reality is this. We have an incumbent party that is exceedingly strong. They have track record of performance. If you, the opposition, any one of the parties, really wants to secure the vote from a more thinking electorate, you have to ask for it. You have to decide. You have to know what the actual role is when you seek to take a seat in Parliament. The role when you sit in that seat is more than just to be a voice of discontent. You got to identify the areas of discontent, but you got to do more. You got to be willing to try to do much more. You have to articulate the solution. You have to articulate your suggested policy change, and you have to try your best to push it through into law.
Are you saying it's not happening right now?
I'm saying it's not happening. I'm saying that a lot of the electorate will give this to the opposition, that they have put their finger on some areas of discontent. Maybe it's immigration, maybe it's CPF-related matters, maybe it's health, maybe it's transport. Good, you put your fingers on those areas. But then if you take a kind of a, sort of a less than ballsy view and say that, look, my role, I'm just going to be this voice of discontent. I'm going to be your insurance policy. I'm going to be the alternate party. That's just not what the electorate is looking for. The electorate, I believe, is looking for an opposition that's going to say, look, I'm going to take you on in Parliament. That's what my seat is for. If I want to be a voice of discontent, I don't have to take that seat in Parliament. I can do it through social media throughout, not just at GE Times. Yep. So I think that's a role and a strategy that's not being addressed by the opposition.
Yes, got it. You've been wanting to, for some time, poor thing. Okay.
Well, I'd just like to touch on what was said earlier in terms of there being the opposition being putting itself as or positioning itself as an alternative or just an insurance. Well, from what I see, it's like, because there's if there had been a chance for a debate, like a live debate, where they can actually engage on the issues. Because what's happening now is, like you had pointed out, going on two separate tracks. Someone's talking about A and someone else is talking about B, and there doesn't seem to be a real engagement. So for that to happen, I feel there should be a forum where the parties can actually engage with one another over a considerable period of time. That's the first point. The second thing is, it seems to me that the focus is more on the heart, on the issues that play to the emotions. So whether you go, apparently the incumbent is actually also trying to do that in this election more so compared to previous elections. And so is that a strategy which is being played by both the incumbent as well as the opposition, in terms of just playing to the hearts of the people rather than discussing the core issues? But perhaps because there's not really a forum for them to actually engage face to face. Just some thoughts.
Now, before I throw it to the panel, I think this is a great point. Let's try and link that to how the social media or the digital media can actually be leveraged on to achieve these outcomes. The reason why I'm saying that is IQ, for example, we had tried very hard to get political parties to come here and have a debate. We had tried. The truth is, very few political parties wanted to participate. The irony of it all is that the party that was willing to engage in a debate was the PAP. The party that was willing to be engaged, willing to come out here and say, I'm prepared to state my view and debate on issues, was the PAP. Most of the opposition parties were unwilling. They needed a lot of persuasion, and finally we had two willing to come. Now, what I find disingenuous is that during the course of the 5 years, or during the course of all these years, one of the major laments of the opposition parties is that the media does not give them a chance to be heard. But When you give them a chance and you don't use it, then it's hard for you to say there's not enough transparency. So what I'm saying is, at the same time, I think there are other pressing constraints, maybe, but this is transition. This has to happen. It may not happen in this election, but as long as social media is around, I think people will start having a lot more opportunities to come and share their views and so on. But let's not expect it to happen overnight. That's the point I'm making. We are a society in transition, But kudos to the PAP for actually stepping forward and said, I'm prepared to debate, And for example, the last debate we had a senior cabinet minister representing the PAP, K. Shanmugam, We had Paul Tambaya representing SDP, and we had Benjamin Pui representing, SPP, although he is from DPP, right? So I think these are baby steps we are taking, but social media can play a role in doing that. Similarly, the role of there's no point making statements in Parliament if you're not going to be featured. That has been the lament. But today, if there are ways in which we can feature them through social media, then I think that'll be encouraging enough for them, there'll be incentive enough for them to stand up and say, all right, I'm going to be judged by the public. I'm going to prepare myself better. With that, I'd like to throw it back to the audience. Balji, what is your sense of the role of social media in opening up the space for a lot more engaging discussions?
Okay, I think we have to define what is social media first.
Yeah.
I think there is social media and there is the online media.
Yes.
I think there are two different
I think we're referring to social media.
Not referring to online. That means you're not referring to IQ. You're not referring to mothership.sg. You're not referring to the middle ground.
Well, I guess the lines are somewhat lines are blurred.
Let me,
maybe you can tell us what your definition is.
No, my definition.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree with it. Anyway, we are here not to agree, right? My definition is social media anybody can do. Right?
Okay.
Which means I start a blog and I create social media. There's no real checks on it. It's done in extremely non-traditional journalism way. They can say whatever they want. I would define generally. Online media, I think there's a bit more, not control, but a bit more sense to it. There's a bit more editing of the copies.
More curated.
More curated. But definitely not the way of the mainstream media.
Okay.
So let me put that in. Let me get rid of that definition first. I think the most important impact of social media, online media, is on the mainstream media, and we are beginning to see that. Not in a great way, but I'm beginning to see it already. If I look at the Straits Times coverage of the election this year, I'm surprised to see it a bit more objective, a bit more balanced. But of course, the demand is that they need it a bit more objective, And the first
and
few
your
days,
comment is objective.
I think so. Okay, it's for you to decide whether I'm objective or not. I'm always objective. Unfortunately, people see it as subjective.
I know.
Some people, and you know who they are. But I want to say that the first 2-3 days of campaigning and the coverage in the Straits Times, I was surprised. In that even the pictures are very important.
The newspaper front page picture of the
crowd,
Workers' Party crowd.
Yeah, but I would look more at the Straits Times than the
broadsheet.
newspaper.
Okay.
Yeah, not because newspaper is a bad newspaper. Editor of newspaper once, it was a great newspaper. I said was. I didn't say is. Anyway, let me come back to the point.
You're being a real Malayali.
Yeah. let me come back to the point that the Straits Times, I was surprised. The way the pictures are displayed, equal play to the pictures. I was surprised to see the kind of pictures for the Workers' Party rally that was showed. I'm not sure how many of you have know this, that in 2006 there was this picture of the Workers' Party rally, which The Straits Times had that picture but didn't use it. Alex Au had that picture and that went viral.
Viral, yeah.
And that was a tremendous impact on the Straits Times. 3 days later, the Straits Times published the same picture. Till today, I don't know why they did that after 3 days later. But anyway, so they published. So I'm saying that, but in the last 2 days, I think, I've seen the coverage change. It is no more as balanced as it was on the first 2 days. So now I put my objectivity aside, take on a bit of a subjective tone, but based on my instincts and my experience in media, I think there has been a call.
Yeah. What do you mean by the change? Can you just describe that change?
Yeah. Page 1 is all about PM. Page 1 is all about Ngeng Hen. Page 1 is all about...
Today's page 1?
Today's
Straits
page 1,
Times?
yeah. Yesterday's Straits Times. No,
what was today's Straits Times front page?
Ngeng Hen, right?
The pictures were not...
Yeah, so I just have this feeling, as I said, I don't have any evidence, so it's bad. So anyway, I think the social media has put that emphasis, and also that because of the social media, and the Straits Times is, I think, not doing it because they believe in responsible journalism, I think they are doing it because their circulation is going down, and as a result, their advertising revenue is going down. It has been already... You can look at the annual reports.
But that's speculative. So why do we leave that?
What is speculative?
No. I mean, let's not. We don't need to go there.
Okay.
But I think from an editorial point of view, your point is taken. Your point is there's an impact on editorial decisions that they're making, and the impact can, in this instance, in the last couple of days, you saw a shift.
Yeah, that's also subjective.
Yeah. So I saw both of you reacting. So let's go to the lady first.
Really?
Yeah.
You want to tell me what I'm allowed to say?
Well, would you want me to?
Censorship.
Yeah, just now.
Oh, really? Yeah? Okay.
No, do you agree,
I think,
Gillian?
in 2011, where social media had an impact was to really do some politicians in. So it really has an impact. Yeah. And where I'm sitting as an analyst, I want to know, I'm interested in what shifts people. Yeah. So I don't need 80% of voters to be tuning in to certain social media platforms or any particular memes. But I need to know which are the ones that cause people to shift. So that's what's of interest. Yeah.
Okay. Fair point. Yes.
Okay. Can I
quick because we
can I just address the 2 points which gentleman at the back, gentleman in front raised about the role of the opposition, and this links up with social media. So I think what we've heard is a lot of unrealistic expectations. Let's be very candid here that the one main opposition party is putting up 28 candidates in 10 electoral divisions out of 89 parliamentary seats, 29 electoral divisions. How on earth do you expect, the giant to debate with the dwarf? What do you expect from a party even like the WP? They will not be able to throw the kind of punches that you want to see. And you must remember the fact that the PAP has been entrenched in the society, in every aspect of the society since 1959. It's not easy at all to displace it. Okay, now coming back to this issue of social media. Again, I feel there's a lot of, but I agree with your point, Julian, that in 2011, social media did do in politicians, and ironically, and this is counterintuitive to, I believe, a lot of people, it did not do in PAP politicians, it did in opposition politicians. Vincent Wijayasinghe, for example, in Holland Bukit Timah, the disclosure of, he attending a gay rights forum, first appeared in social media, then was picked up by PAP activists and then brought up by Vivian Balakrishnan. And in the case of the Hougang by-election, what did Mr. Yoshin Leong in was again something that appeared in a particular website that then jumped from that website to the offline media, okay? So this is the ironies. you have to base everything on facts rather than impressions. There are only two clear-cut instances of politicians having their careers cut short in Singapore, and they are both opposition politicians. The last point that I may raise about social media, and this is my really favorite topic, that a lot of these things in Singapore might ultimately have very little to do with personalities, politics, and branding, but the processes and mechanics of the election system in Singapore. I brought my polling card here. It's a copy. I'm very careful. I didn't bring the original, so the elections department doesn't have to worry about me. I'm always very cautious about that. Now, what does the back say? Simple thing, in 4 languages. Voting is compulsory. We have mandatory voting in Singapore, okay? You guys think that your social media is going to reach out to 85, 90% of the people who will be turning out because of mandatory voting? No. There's going to be a huge segment of indifferent voters there. And the two parties that understand the entire processes of this election and the electoral system are the PAP and the WP. And they are going after that segment of voters, knocking on the doors. You cannot reach those voters through social media. That's all I have to say on that.
Good point. I think we accept that point. And that, I believe, is one of the reasons why the resource-strapped opposition parties perhaps decline coming for because it's also time constrained. Yes. They can't afford the time. They just don't have fat to afford the time to come for debates, because that time could have been spent knocking on doors. So it's a great point you've raised. Now, we have just about 10 minutes more. Now, I'd like to round up the discussion by asking for some broad sense of how the parties are faring, right? You don't have to say who's going to win, who's going to lose, but just a broad sense. What do you think are, in your view, what are the opposition parties that seem to be presenting a fairly formidable, credible opposition, credible position here in Singapore, from your sense? And I'd like to put this question to a new citizen. Neil, you became a citizen when? A year ago?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Now, so you've had the opportunity to be in elections in different countries. So when you come to Singapore, you're observing it with a fresh pair of eyes.
First and foremost, I've just been surprised at how the opposition parties have not been able to attract stronger candidates, knowing fully well that the election was coming for quite a while. So to some extent, that's a disappointment, because the quality of candidates could have been far better.
This is much better than what we are used to. I think it's a question of benchmarking. Okay.
The second is being happy of getting 40% and seeing that as victory, or having that as a goal. That is disappointing. The third is calling oneself an alternative rather than opposition, going back to Professor's point. If you're an opposition, call yourself an opposition. Stand up for who you are. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I understand that I've followed, even before I became a citizen, I'd followed 2 elections before, 2006 and 2011, so we've come a long way, but to answer your question, I think there is a far longer way to go.
So are you saying that none of the opposition parties in this election has impressed you enough to be reasonably engaged in this election? As in, enough of a competition?
Enough of competition to really worry the ruling party in a serious way. I think the PAP has very high thresholds of 60%, which in other jurisdictions would be a dream.
Yeah.
of having 80 out of 87 seats. That would be a dream. So when you benchmark yourself that high, obviously the expectations are very high and the cause for disappointment is high. But in reality, there isn't going to be a substantial dent made by the opposition in this election.
Okay.
But I see this as a transition.
Yep.
So the question is, the next election, hopefully the opposition can generate a stronger debate on significant issues. It goes back to the point that was raised earlier.
By Adrian?
Yes. If the data is there in terms of what kind of foreigners are not wanted in this country, then in my opinion, that should be put forward by the opposition parties, not just the ruling party.
Okay, thank you. Right, so any party that you think is performing well enough to be a worthy enough opponent of the PAP?
Yeah, personally, I feel that the SDP has raised its game because I went to the rally last night actually, and I was pretty impressed by Prof. Tambia and Dr. Chee's speeches, and even Jaslyn Goh. Actually, I mean, I'm not from that precinct, but the point is that that what we talked about earlier in terms of the mind and the heart or the head. I think they addressed both issues. I mean, both domains of the population. They talked about issues that matter to the heart, as well as things that we could think about and on a cognitive, very intellectual, rational manner. So for me, that was quite impressive. Yeah.
All right, Shanta.
Well, I think the SDP obviously is an important party to have because they are one of the few parties that actually champions ideals, things like social justice, equality. But I'm not sure that as a society it has enough appeal to cross the 50% mark because people are still mainly concerned with bread and butter issues. And then there's also the legacy of Dr. Chi, who I think he has regained a lot of respect from a segment of the population, but I think there are still a lot of people who view him with a certain amount of suspicion.
Yep.
Which is why I would say then the Workers' Party still retains pole position in the opposition party that is likely to make the most gains simply because they are a centrist party, they are a moderate party, they know their audience, and they know that most Singaporeans are not looking for a change in government at this point in time. Workers' Party also knows the limits of its abilities at this point. And I think the public has seen the party as one that is not rabble-rousing. It doesn't oppose for the sake of opposing. It actually agrees with the government a lot of the time where they feel it has taken the right decision. And that's, I think, what society's view of constructive politics is right now, and Workers' Party plays to that very well.
Okay, 3 more comments. Bernard, I'd like you to say something. Don't just sit
Actually,
pretty.
Vishwa, I'm not going to comment on which party is doing well, but I wanted to just maybe
The
raise a
mic closer
point.
to you, please. Thank
Raise
you.
a point on what I think the issues are, and the point that parties sort of skid around the issues but really don't give the answers. I think this is an important election. Post SG50, I think there are 3 questions that all Singaporeans ought to ask themselves of charting our future. The first is, what do we do with rising inequality? It is a challenge. And if you look at all the issues that have been raised, whether it's about immigration issues, it's all linked really to the rising inequality. The rising inequality is also paired by a drop in social mobility. So it's not like before where kids who are born in the lowest quartile has a chance to rise to the highest quartile. I think social studies have shown that that's dropped in Singapore. It's not just a uniquely Singapore problem, but it is something that we ought to ask ourselves. And different parties obviously have different responses to this question. The second big question is, how do we create success for the next 50 years in our economy? What we've done before is not going to work going forward. I think we need to be more creative. We need to start producing intellectual property because just being successful in manufacturing what the advanced countries do is not going to lead us to that future. And so we probably will have to have a complete different talent set and a restructuring of how the economy is that will lead to the future. And I think that's challenging. The last thing is more social in nature, is our definition of happiness. The first 50 years is having nice HDB flat, is having cars, is having credit cards. But moving forward is happiness wrapped around GDP. Right? And I think more and more Singaporeans are looking for something beyond just the GDP. What is our definition of what makes us a happy society? We've seen dozens of reports telling us that we're one of the most unhappiest countries in the world. And that's not the number one thing that we want to have. Sure. I think these three questions are really key to what defines going forward. I frankly...
And you would have liked to see better engagement.
Engagement and answers to these three very big questions.
Okay. All right, two more quick comments. Oh, all right, good. I like to see hands. Right behind you, yes. You go ahead. Okay. Yeah. The mic closer to you.
Hi, I wanted to comment that actually I feel that we need to celebrate the achievements of our opposition alternative parties, because I think they have come a long way, and they have weaknesses and all, but if we want them to continue to improve, we need to give them that encouragement. Yeah, and I think that the PAP has a lot to learn from like the stronger opposition parties like SDP and WP. The way they were able to engage both minds and hearts, I think that's something that they can learn.
Thank you. Yes, Maida.
I just want to say with Sing first, Singapore first, I hope no self-respecting, country-loving person votes for them, because I think the premise on which they were formed is offensive and unkind. And it's dangerous for Singapore to even think like that.
I mean protectionist
yes.
viewpoint. Okay.
And I hope they lose their deposits and crawl back to where they came from.
Wow.
Yeah, a quick comment, yes. Because until 2 years ago, he was one of them.
No, that's not the point. But in every country, you have people who are xenophobic. You look at France, you look at the US, you have extremes. I actually think that gets a more focused dialogue. You may not agree with them, but that's a different issue. But sure. it certainly encourages dialogue of what one is about and what one is not about. If I may just very quickly say, I fully appreciate the fact that Rome wasn't built in a day for the opposition parties, but we seem to be crawling to Rome rather than running to Rome.
No, it's just that Rome is very far. Right. Yes. Yes. Last three comments, and we got to stop there. Right? Okay. Quick ones.
Mine is a quick one.
Yes.
I think just to address what you said about the parties and how they're doing, I think we all agree that there is definitely a step up in terms of the opposition party. But I think Derek pointed out a very important point about the systemic issues with the electoral process. So I think if you just go back a few weeks ago, the electoral boundaries that were redrawn, I think we all know that certain areas of the country, there were changes, like Punggol, Jurong, maybe there are changes, but Joo-Chiat, has Joo-Chiat changed enough for it to really be plucked out and put somewhere else? So with this kind of systemic issues, the opposition have a uphill task. So I think we have to be fair to what they have done and what they've achieved, and I appreciate the comment by one of the persons here that the PAP has got lots to learn from the opposition party and some of the characters there.
Okay.
Quick one. Just a very quick statement. I think that opposition should stop thinking about themselves as insurance, to say the least, because insurance is a matter of hedging, and hedging never gives you profits. So I would definitely say that they need to start thinking of themselves as opposition in order to enforce their points in the long run, at least. So that's for the next election, at least, I hope. Yeah.
Good to hear that from a first-time voter.
Sorry. Yes, and I agree with that, and that nobody has a monopoly on good ideas.
Or on wisdom.
And wisdom.
Yes. I saw some hands behind. Yeah, go ahead. Please pass the mic behind.
I think that the Workers' Party and
Closer.
SDP have put up, promising policies that they want to impart. But I think as most of the younger generations, we don't have that background, so to speak, at the age and the experience of voting many times and listening to all the different politicians say what they can do for Singapore. But I think one of the reasons why the younger generation might vote for the opposition parties is not because they want PAP to lose, rather that they want some pressure to be put on the government. So even though they don't give...
Why is that necessary?
Because we just want more to be done for us. And although we know that they're not good enough to probably win more than 50% of votes, but at least that the government will see that, okay, people are voicing out their concerns and that, something should be done. So that could be, in my opinion, that's one of the main reasons why the younger generation will probably vote for the opposition.
All right, thank you. Can I go to the people who have not asked? Anyone who has not spoken yet who wants to say? Yeah, gentleman over here.
I just wanted to comment on the, as my neighbor has mentioned and has been noted several times from the audience, I think we're beginning to see a differentiation between the opposition parties themselves, where people like SDP and Workers' Party are noticeably different from each other, and they themselves are noticeably different from the rest of the opposition. Yeah. For example, Sing First. And I really hope that this is a sign of maturation from the part of both the parties themselves and the society at large, where we're facing a more perhaps normal political situation where we don't run into this idea that that the government is the PAP and everyone else, that there are significant differences between the opposition as well, and those are things that we will need to take note of in the future.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, yes.
I guess almost in conclusion, we've talked a lot about the quality of the debate and the lack of strategy and so on. And I wonder if it's really because of the role of the MP today, because the town council issue should we really be talking this much about town councils at our national elections, right? I feel
do we want to end with that? Oh God. Okay. All right.
Well, yes. That's something that I think we need to think about, especially as we go to the polls, as well as what we want our MPs to be doing going forward. Why is it really about dealing with town council issues, or is that distracting from discussing national issues? Would our opposition parties, would our PAP MPs be better off focusing on national issues than whether or not someone's ceiling is being cleaned, whether the walkway is being built? Okay, and I feel it's a huge distraction.
Thank you. Has to be the very last comment before we go to the audience. Panel,
I think the opposition has definitely improved. Okay, we see some very good candidates, Oxbridge candidates coming up, putting up very strong debates.
Oxbridge doesn't mean good. Never mind. Okay.
Let's give it to them. Yeah. But I think, for me, the other point is perhaps more, I'm not sure if it's more telling or not, but has the PAP's quality dropped? I'm not sure.
Okay. Is that a rhetorical question? No. Okay, no. We shan't go there. All right. So with that, I'd like to now ask my four panelists to each take no more than 1 minute to wrap, because some of us need to rush off. So it's for that reason that I need to wrap it fast. Okay. So no more than a minute. One key point in response to my question: do you feel that in observing this election so far, the campaign, we are making progress as a society? Are we making progress as a society? Or are we standing exactly the same spot and hantar kaki, as they say? No, it's a serious question, because I'm not sure. Sometimes I feel we are taking 1 step forward, 2 steps back. So are we making real progress as a society, as a collective, in the direction that we want to go? So let me start perhaps with Kirpal.
I think we are on a balance. I mean, it's not dramatic, but it's very firm and certain. I think there are little Davids emerging in different parts of Singapore, but the Goliath is still very centered. And if the little Davids perhaps were a little bit more coordinated to bring up a real charismatic, real David, I think then we will make a lot of progress. But we are a society in transition. And can I, in my usual way, end on a very, very, not humorous, but tending towards that note. I think on the question of migration, foreign labor, and all of that, I think we Singaporeans really need to be very, very critical and take a very hard look at it. And the answer is very simple. My heart reaches out to current Prime Minister because for the last 3 National Day rallies, he's always been saying, help me, help the nation make babies. I think the answer is very simple. The new economy is going to be very challenging. Talent will be scarce and talent will be hardly sought after. And in order to stay ahead, we either get this talent from wherever we can or we make the talent. So we can't have it both ways. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to say that we don't want to have domestic helpers that are Singaporeans. We don't want service people who are Singaporeans. We don't want a lot of bankers who are Singaporeans. And at the same time, say that we also don't want foreigners in Singapore. I think this is a real conflict. And I think we need to be very clear-headed about this.
Thank you. We've got to stop. Yes, Derek.
Okay, I believe that actually we are making progress, given the fact that there has been tremendous obstacles in front of the opposition. And I agree with Shanta's comments earlier on that, for example, SDP and WP have been making progress. And I don't think you can discount that whatsoever. For WP, I know for a particular fact, because I do have some contact with them, that they tend to have this unofficial policy of generally lowering expectations and then over-delivering. Okay? And finally, the point relates to our friend, the new citizen, Neil. Please forgive my remarks if I apologize if they appear to be condescending or whatnot. But you cannot compare the situation in Singapore to other countries. We talked about mechanics and all that of the election process. The Electoral Boundaries Review Committee report was only introduced a few weeks before the dissolution of Parliament, and then another change was made that we suddenly discovered. You will have pictures of candidates on the ballot papers. That actually, a lot of you might not have thought about this, but I've been working on electoral politics in Singapore for 25 years. That makes a significant change in how the psychology of the voter when he sees the ballot paper and how he will put the cross against a road there. So I think these things cannot be discounted. So I do not think it's really fair to compare the situation we have in Singapore with other jurisdictions. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Gillian.
Your question was whether we are evolving to a more mature society. I think we certainly are. I think the discussion we've had here is really rich and it illustrates that. What we need to move to is a situation where, and this is familiar to media people like Viswa, we don't have voters who dip in and dip out, and they only dip in at election time. So to John's point, just take any number of documents. The committee called the Election Strategies Committee gave a very large blueprint in 2010 to the issue of talent. Then Budget 2010 gave a very large direction to the question of talent and manpower. You asked for what segments? There were 2 discussion papers and 1 thick, well, not thick, important document to the public about that population issue that was issued by the government in 2010, again about the numbers and the segments. And the question was posed, which segments do you want? Who participated? The call was issued to the public. So let me end by saying the biggest policy debates take place not during the general election. Why, I don't know. But in the past, they take place in between the elections. Yeah. Go on social media, look for some of these documents that I cited, and you'll see the long history of this question of population to address many of your questions. And so will mature more if we are not dip in, dip out, but we track those issues, cost of living, affordability, what are young people, do they face a happier future, what do we do for economic vibrancy? It's actually all there, yeah. So let me end by saying, yeah, we are moving, and we should continue to press on. We should recognize what are the big issues to HPTC and nothing to do with cleaning of hawker centres. It's a different national issue. It cuts to the Singapore brand, which is integrity, and that's why we do make our way on the regional and the global level. It's about integrity. So I think we will realize this more and more so as the days go by.
Thank you. My friend.
You wanted it very short, right?
Difficult.
My answer is yes.
Don't be like that.
Well done.
Hey, I haven't finished. There's a pregnant pause before I move on. No caveats, no riders, yes. And I think I see that in two areas. One quite visible, one not so visible. The visible part is how the PAP has changed, or is changing. Maybe public not happy with that kind of change, but the change is happening. And I don't have to go into the details. The second one, not so visible, as I said, is I can see the public, and not just the older people who have no jobs, people like me, going out and getting engaged, but I see that in the younger people, right? And even if they are misguided to some extent, I think this political engagement is good for the future of the country. Full stop.
Well, my wrap-up comment is this: I definitely see progress. I'm highly encouraged when I go down to the ground, because for me the difference is the people who attend the rallies are not just anymore shouting without thinking. For me, that's a discernible difference. They are listening quietly, they're whispering their views to the person next to them, as opposed to just yelling and shouting. For me, that's a visible shift, right? Secondly, I think the issue of fear, while it is still somewhere, it's smoldering somewhere, it's not burning. So, fear-mongering or whatever won't work. It's not going to come back again, right? But progress is only going to continue and increase in pace if in politics there is a basic level of fair play. And I think you can't codify it. It has to be at a human instinct level, and all parties involved must embrace it. And it cannot be double standards. And one important point about fair play is when someone else is making a point and with passion, stop smirking. Because there's nothing more off-putting than people in positions of authority smirking when someone else is making a point, because it makes you look like a smarty pants and it doesn't endear you to the electorate.
Yep.
So really at the end of the day, there's something to be said in elections about being human and demonstrating the capacity for human emotions of empathy, not just in words, but deep down. And I don't see enough of that. And I hope in the next 3 days, we will have a lot more decency and a lot more humanity in our election, because this is our country, regardless of whether it's PAP or whether it's the opposition parties or alternative parties.
Or whether you're an NMP.
Whether you're an NMP. Yeah. For a moment, I forgot I was not in Parliament at this point in time. Right. With that, it leaves me now to thank my panelists, Balji, Gillian, Derek, Kirpal, and of course you wonderful audience. And I hope that we'll have a lot more conversations such as this where we don't need to watch our P's and Q's too much and be a lot more chill. As they say in Singapore, relax.
Yeah.
Right? And you, our studio audience, have done a great job. Our viewers watching at home, live on iq.sg, do keep your inconvenient questions coming in. It's inconvenient sometimes, but we like it. And stay rightly informed, engaged on the things that matter to all of us. Share your views, log on to our website, iq.sg. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter for fresh views and reasoned analysis on GE 2015. Come Wednesday, that's 2 days from now, on the last day of campaigning, we gather some of the biggest, most interesting scribes for their sense of the ground in GE 2015. What do journalists say? So we are gathering a bunch of journalists, and we'd like to make it a tradition. Every election, on the last day of campaigning, we're going to bring together journalists of past and present to give our assessment of the election before we cool off. Right? So as the final debate IQ in the lead up to the polling day, we offer the rare voice, and we want you to participate, you, the audience. Right? So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Don't forget to tune in on Wednesday, 3 to 5 p.m. Remember, you ask the questions, we make it happen. Thank you. Audience.
Biswa.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So we need more discussions like this, right? Yep, good. Hold on, we're going to take a group picture so that you guys can be invited.
ID'd. So that you can be ID'd.
Yes.